Dear sisters, let us get closer to Allah. Dear sisters, let us learn of Rasulullah. Dear sisters, let's make the future bright. Dear sisters, mothers, daughters, and wives. Dear sisters, let us get closer to Allah.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على الرسول الصادق الأمين محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين. My dear sisters in Islam, welcome to a new live episode of our program, Dear Sisters. It's a great honor and a great pleasure for us to be with you tonight in your homes. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that this afternoon is an afternoon of great blessings, inshallah, that in this next hour, bi'idhnillah ta'ala, we learn something about our deen, al-Islam. We learn something about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and about our beloved Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. As you know, we're just a few days from the beautiful month of Ramadan. Ramadan is expected to be, inshallah, either on Friday or on Saturday. Subhanallah. Time is flying. Time is flying from last Ramadan. I'm sure all of you can remember last Ramadan. Some of you who are watching us, my dear sisters, were giving birth last Ramadan. Some of you are giving birth this Ramadan. Some of you were Muslim last Ramadan. Some of you were not Muslim, and this may be the first time that you're experiencing the beautiful month of Ramadan. No matter what our conditions are, what we all agree on is, inshallah, we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, first of all, to allow us to witness the month of Ramadan. And we continue saying in this beautiful month, Allahumma ballighna Ramadan. Oh Allah, allow us to witness Ramadan. Oh Allah, allow us to be one of the people who are amongst those who witness the beautiful month of Ramadan, bi'idhnillah ta'ala. And we make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that this Ramadan, bi'idhnillah ta'ala, is the best Ramadan ever. And for that, inshallah, I'm joined in the studio by Sheikh Ibrahim Zidan so that we can talk, bi'idhnillah ta'ala, about the beautiful month of Ramadan and how are we getting ready for it. Are we getting ready only with our bodies, or should we also be getting ready with our hearts? Sheikh Ibrahim, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. How are you doing this afternoon? Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. I know you've been traveling the past week. That's why we recorded episode for last week. How were your travels?
Alhamdulillah, wonderful.
Alhamdulillah. You got to see brothers and sisters in the United States. Tell us about their conditions. I haven't been there in a while.
Wallahi, mashallah, there is always good things, and when you go to the masajid, mashallah, you see all that is good. And people are eager to learn, mashallah, waiting for Ramadan. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bring this ummah together, and people have the concern to the whole, and we should never forget, the situation of our brothers and sisters everywhere.
Yes.
Like in Syria, in Burma, and everywhere there's a Muslim. This is one ummah, and we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bring what is good, inshallah.
Ameen, bi'idhnillah ta'ala. This afternoon, Sheikh Ibrahim, I want to talk about something very important. What most people think is that Ramadan is we're sacrificing from our bodies so that we can please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We're leaving the food, we're leaving the drink, we're leaving the physical pleasures, for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But so we focus a lot on the physical aspect of Ramadan, standing in prayer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala during the Taraweeh and during Qiyam al-Layl, reading Quran. What does the soul have to do with it? Are there different conditions for our hearts? Do people enter Ramadan, one person with one type of heart, the other person with another type of heart, the third person with another type of heart, or are we all the same?
Alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah. The heart is the place where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sees first. When it comes to the intentions of the person, when it comes to the rewards from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, whether the deed is accepted or not, whether the elevation of the person and the levels of deeds from one person to the other is according to what's present in the heart, plus the physical actions. The difference between a believer and a hypocrite is in the lowest level pit of the hellfire. The believers are in Jannah. Big difference between both. The difference between them, not the physical actions necessarily, but it's what's in their hearts.
Because many times the hypocrites perform the same physical actions that the believers do. Even some of the hypocrites during the time of the Prophet ﷺ would go and they would pray with the Prophet ﷺ. They would go and fight in jihad, in the wars. Physically their bodies are there, but their hearts are not present, as you said.
And when we were talking to the Muslims, those who love Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and they want to do the best they can in the month of Ramadan or the entire life, still we have to work on our hearts, because the reward can be given or the deed might not be accepted, and the deed can be accepted and the reward is multiplied by 10 or 700 times or 700,000 or whatever multiplication that is. All depend on what's present in the heart from the love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the fear of Allah, the hope for the rewards from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, sincerity, and basically exalting the deen of Allah. The thing that drives us is the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and plus the physical actions according to make the deeds according to the way of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. So we want to make sure that before the month of Ramadan that we realize the importance of what's in the heart, what's in our hearts before the month of Ramadan, due month of Ramadan. And one of which, for example, is when we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for forgiveness, because sins prevents the person from elevating oneself to the high levels. This is an opportunity for the sins to be forgiven. This is an opportunity to be freed from the hellfire. As the Prophet ﷺ said, every night in Ramadan there are people freed from the hellfire. Laylatul Qadr, where the worship is better than 1,000 months, people might physical things the same way. And the night is short, by the way, this summer, right, in many places on the face of earth. So you might pray 3/4 of the night in 3-4 hours, for example, right? But how is your heart when you are standing in the salah? How much you have of the love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the fear of Allah and so on. And this is what we need to build ourselves to achieve, inshallah ta'ala, before the month of Ramadan.
Just remind my dear sisters, inshallah, that you can give us a call, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala, throughout the hour, inshallah, at 002-0238-555, 248 or 249, inshallah. Give us a call at any time, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala, and share with us your thoughts, your comments about the beautiful month of Ramadan, and ask us your questions. This is also, an open question and answer session, where you can ask us any questions relating to Muslim women specifically, and to relationships, family relationships in general, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. Sheikh Ibrahim, there's this idea, I believe it may not be true, but you tell us based on a hadith that may not be authentic, that during the month of Ramadan the rewards are multiplied by 70 times, or for example a nafilah would be equal to a compulsory act otherwise, and the reward of the compulsory act is 70 times. Is that true, or is there a problem with that?
This is not an authentic hadith. There is such statements, but it's not authentic from the Prophet ﷺ. And the multiplications of the deeds in Ramadan, it's something there is no doubt about it whatsoever. And multiplication in all matters of good deeds. But that specific hadith with that specific words, it's not from the words of the Prophet ﷺ.
And as you said, there is a hadith, a sahih hadith that is multiplied by 700 times, and even more from who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wishes. So.
And fasting, for example, has no limits to it, as we know from the
hadith. Yes.
That the fasting is to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and He would give the rewards with unlimited account for it, right? And this is the great mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But there is something very, very important for us, and that is, it's a great opportunity that we don't have an excuse anymore not to be among the righteous people, since fasting is one of the means to achieve taqwa, the fear of Allah, and to be dutiful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We always say, it's difficult for me to quit this, it's difficult for me to do that, but this nafs, our own self and soul, is like basically a mountain, as the ulama they say. You don't have a way around it. To overcome your desires and things that prevent you to fast, you have to climb that mountain. So you have to go through the struggle stage before. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made it easy for us in the month of Ramadan. Why? Because fasting is mandatory. It's not an optional thing. So you have to do it. So most of the Muslims, they do is except those who have exceptions. So since you're doing it anyway, do it the right way, so that the end of the month of Ramadan, matters of obedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala become so easy and so simple, because you get used through the month of Ramadan to go over this nafs that is taking you back and making you and depriving you from being steadfast on the deen of Allah and tasting the sweetness of al-Iman.
Sisters, inshallah, feel free to continue giving us a call at 002-0238-555, 248 or 249, inshallah. Or also through Skype at our Skype account, Huda_TV, Huda_TV, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. Sheikh Ibrahim, what message do you have for brothers and sisters, and unfortunately this is a big number, who fast during the month of Ramadan but they do not pray?
Allah musta'an. It has a very interesting point before I say something to them.
Yes.
You would never find a Muslim that prays 5 times a day and do not fast, unless he has an exception or a condition. You would never find that. But you would find the opposite. You would find someone that doesn't pray but fast. Although fasting physically is more difficult than making 5 times salah. Isn't that correct?
Yes.
Why this is the case? Because the salah tanha an al-fahsha'i wal-munkar. That prevents the person from falling into sin and make the person exalt the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and respect the orders of Allah. And for those who would only fast and do not make their salah, the fasting is not accepted this way. We're not saying not to fast, we're saying pray. So keep on fasting, definitely. Nobody would say, well, since it's not accepted, then there is no need for me to fast. No, continue to fast. Never break fast. But at the same time, you need to make the salah. Because the deen of Islam, the pillars, if the pillars is missing, that means there's no religion, especially the salah, which is the second pillar of Islam, the most important act in our life. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made it easy, only 5 times a day. So this is a starting point. We should take upon ourselves that we pray 5 times a day. You would find yourself at the end of the month, the easiest thing in your life is to make the salah regularly, inshallah.
Barakallahu feek. Sister Umar from Egypt, Assalamu alaikum. Assalamu alaikum, Sister Umar. Sister Umar.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Go ahead, sister, with your question or comment.
Sheikh Ossama?
Yes, go ahead.
I thank you for this beneficial program. I ask Allah to make it raise your scales, inshallah.
Ameen ya Rabb, ameen.
I have a big issue and I'm in need for Sheikh Zidan's cell phone.
Okay, inshallah. You can ask the brothers in the control room. Inshallah, they'll give you information about that. Bismillah ta'ala.
Sheikh Zidan, if you please, can I call you right after the program?
Sheikh Ibrahim,
Inshallah.
she can call you, inshallah. Okay, bismillah ta'ala. Yes, you can call him after the program, inshallah. If the brothers, please take her back to the control room and give her the number, bismillah ta'ala. Jazakumullah khair. Barakallahu feek, Sister Mama. When you were talking about the conditions of the Muslim heart before the month of Ramadan and of course during the month of Ramadan, to make things easier, are we able to categorize them and say there are maybe 3 or 4 types of hearts that we can put ourselves in and see where we are right now and where we can move up?
Yes, there's actually there's diseases that adorns the hearts. Heart is like a container, and we need to check what's in the container today. We would find filth, right? And this filth is basically sins. You have attachment to other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. A person would have envy, would have anything that is done even physically, it has an effect in the heart, as the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, that a person with every sin, it's like a black dot in the heart. You have basically anything that you see has an effect in the heart. And all kinds of things, forgetfulness and so on and so forth. And we have the things that adorns the heart, the love of Allah, the sincerity, the good deeds and so on. So it's, we get it on by making sure that we clean our hearts. The easiest and the fastest way to our hearts is to sincerely and truthfully repent to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. All conditions. Shaitan will come and whisper about my job, about my work, about my situation, my family, my wife. Forget about all this. These are nothing. These are creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Turn to the creator of the heavens and the earth alone. And when a person turns to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone and have that feel of that we are in need of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, definitely Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would help the person in such a way when a person is being true. And whoever leaves something for the sake of Allah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will replace it by something better. We have to have that level of sacrifice. And most of it, by the way, it does not go beyond our hearts. The sacrifice is only here. But in reality, you won't starve to death. You won't lose things in your life. You continue to do most silly things that make them away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Shaitan who promises us poverty.
So just give it up, put your trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and see what happens. You would enjoy. We need to enjoy the deen of Islam. We have a problem that we look into the deen of Islam. This is for someone that is looking at it from far away. Do this, do that, orders, burdens. We're living in a life.
So basically a system of do's and don'ts.
Right. And it's too hot, and hijab this, and so many different things to be said and whispers to the shaitan. In reality, this is the joy of this life. But we need to, again, climb that mountain.
We need to enjoy Islam.
Right. It's a real joy. This is the Prophet ﷺ when he said, وَجُعَلَتْ قُرَّةُ عَيْنِي فِي الصَّلَاةِ. The jewel of my eyes have been made in the salah. The Prophet ﷺ was the happiest man ever walked on the face of earth. أَلَمْ نَشْرَحْ لَكَ صَدْرَكَ. The Sahaba radiallahu anhu, a person, when he stabbed, he would say, Fustu Rabbil Ka'b. I am a winner by the Lord of Al-Ka'bah. This is the worst situation that a human being can be in physically. So what about that person when he is in a lesser level of being trials and tribulations?
Yes.
How happy he is. If it's the moment of death, he would say that. So this is something that we have to put our foot in the water, as they say. And this is an opportunity in the month of Ramadan that you cannot be passive about it. You have to fast. You have to taste the thirst and the hunger for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is the only act of worship that there is no riyah and showing off in it. You can show off that you're making salah, you can show off that you're giving charity, you're doing something. But what are you doing to fast? You're not doing something. You're abstaining from eating. So you can break his fast and nobody would see him. So that's why it's such a ibadah that we prove to ourselves that can be sincere. And that's why the reward of it is tremendous by the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Is there a relationship between rizq and the month of Ramadan?
Of course, definitely. There is a strong relationship between rizq and ibadah in general. Rizq, provisions, and acts of worship is a very close relationship, because this is what the fitna of people, that they don't want to do the acts of worship out of the fear of the rizq. That's why we would find in the Quran the verses that has rizq and acts of worship are together. For example, وَأْمُرْ أَهْلَكَ بِالصَّلَاةِ وَاصْطَبِرْ عَلَيْهَا لَا نَسْأَلُكَ رِزْقًا نَحْنُ نَرْزُقُكَ. Order your family to be patient. We don't ask you for provisions. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will provide for you. And many verses like this. The angels, when they came to Maryam alayhi salam and accepted her dua, they came in what state in her? That came to her when she is in the mihrab, or the Zakaria in the mihrab. كلما دخل عليها المحراب وجد عندها رزق. Every time he entered the place of worship for her, he would find provisions.
So the more that we worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the more that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala blesses us and He gives us sustenance and rizq.
Right. And this doesn't have to be the numbers. It can be the blessings that we have in this life, the contentment, and that you are in no need of the people whatsoever, and the blessings itself in the wealth that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala provides for us.
Jazakallah khairan. Let's take Sister Fatima from the UAE. Assalamu alaikum, sister.
Wa alaikum salam.
Yes, sister, go ahead. Do you have a question or a comment?
I have a question.
Yes.
Brother Osama.
Yes, go ahead, sister.
Okay, can I play Tarawih with Makkah while I'm at UAE in my house?
Can you, did you get the question?
You pray Tarawih at home?
Can I pray Tarawih with Makkah while I'm at UAE?
Okay. With Mecca.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, while you're watching TV. Okay, inshallah. Thank you so
I'm
much.
watching TV, yeah, live.
I'll answer you بإذن الله تعالى. Jazakallah khairan, Sister Fatima. Barakallah feek. Can she make her imam the imam in Mecca while she's watching TV? She's in the UAE.
It's good that you get the clarification, because I understood the question first.
Yes.
Can I
Mashallah,
make the
Allah reward
Tarawih
the
at
brothers,
home?
they told me in my earpiece.
Right.
Alhamdulillah.
Making the Tarawih at home by physically the person praying and the imam is there in the home, for example, the sister praying together or a sister praying alone, mashallah, this is a good thing. But the question is, can she make the salah with the imam of the haram by the television live like this? Of course, this is not permissible and it's not valid, and there is no such a thing as difference of opinion in this whatsoever. She has to be in the haram. She has to be, if it's too crowded, then she's outside, where the lines are being connected. But even, for example, far away from the haram, can people would pray by the prayer of the haram? It is not permissible unless the lines are being connected, and if it takes them far away and it's connected, then it's permissible. So this is not valid whatsoever.
What do you advise her to do, inshallah, in her case?
To pray at home, mashallah. If there's people in the family, they can pray together. To go to the masjid, of course, if it's done with the condition, there is no showing one's beauty and observing the hijab, and there's no intermingling and so on. It's a good thing to go for the masjid if the means are easy. If not, pray at home. And the best place, of course, for women to pray is their home, and seek help from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is definitely, it's better, of course, than doing anything that is not permissible.
We have a sister who's asking. She says, mashallah, she likes to listen to the Quran, but during the month of Ramadan, she's always very busy cooking and other things. So she's asking if it's permissible for her to listen to the Quran through a stereo or through a loudspeaker in her home while she's cooking and doing these things.
Now, it's permissible, and even if she's not focused with every verse that is being recited, it's still permissible. And verse in the Quran, وَإِذَا قُرِئَ الْقُرْآنُ فَاسْتَمِعُوا لَهُ وَأَنصِتُوا, that when the Quran is recited, you should listen to it attentively and so on. It's mainly talking about the Quran in the salah. But other than the salah, a woman in her house cooking and so on, she can have Quran being recited at all times, and she can catch some verses and so on. But also one of the things, as I was with the brother a couple of days ago, and he said something very nice when it comes to the sisters at home. Sometimes, or some of them, they would just have Quran recited the whole time, which is a beautiful thing. And some of them, they don't understand Arabic, so they're just going with the voice of the reciter, which is still good. The Quran is being recited in the house.
Of course. Yeah.
But also, don't deprive yourself from having lectures of knowledge being played, even if you don't focus also with every sentence that is being said. Get used to this. You might have some benefit of what is being said with, of course, with the Quran.
Jazakallah khair. Sister Zainab from UAE, Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam. I have a question, please.
Go ahead, sister.
When you're going for Umrah, because I want to go for Umrah, is it okay to wear haram clothing before taking intention in the miqat?
And what's the second question?
And the second question is it part of Sunnah or during Umrah or take dua every time or every day? Because
Okay.
I know people usually do it after Isha every day. So I just want to know, is it part of Sunnah?
Inshallah. Jazakallah khairan. I think you got this question more than I have, so go ahead, inshallah.
With having the ihram clothing before a person reaches, putting the clothes on of ihram, of course, the ihram for women, there's no special clothing for ihram for women. Ihram for women is in their faces and their hands only. So their faces to niqab, which shape the face, and they don't wear gloves. But if she covers her face, she just puts something on top of it, but not the niqab, not the one that shapes the face. And she can put her hands underneath the khimar. Some women, they believe that it has to be white clothing, brand new clothing that they buy, things like this. This is not from the sunnah. Actually, white is not a good color actually for women because it shapes and so on. So it's the normal clothing, but it's the ihram is in the hand and the face. For men, they can wear the ihram clothing before they reach the miqat if there is a reason for it. For example, they would take the plane, right? And it'll be difficult for them to change in the plane. And wearing the clothes, no significance to it whatsoever. They are not in state of ihram. What's against the sunnah is to be in the state of ihram before the miqat. So for example, if the sister from UAE, to be in state of ihram from her home or in the airport, this is not good. This is against the sunnah. But to be with the clothing and so on, and then when a person is in the plane, for example, and the pilot would say there's 5 minutes or something like that, then people say, Allahumma umrah, then so that they're ready, they don't have to go to the bathroom, for example, in the airport and so on. So this is the only case that it should be done. If a person is going through the land, there is no need. Or if a person put the clothes because it's inconvenient at the miqat, no problem, as long as they do not observe the state of al-ihram then. It should be close or by the miqat.
Jazakallah khair. Barakallah. Answer the question, take a phone call from Sister Fatma from Gambia. Assalamu alaikum, sister.
Yeah.
Sister Fatma? Sister Fatma, are you with us? Looks like we're having a problem, inshallah, with the call from Gambia. Sister Fatma, inshallah, try to give us a call back. Let's answer the second question. She's asking about making dua while being at Umrah or Mecca in general. She said some people do it after Isha. Is there a specific time for it, or what is the condition with that?
If it's meant to be dua during Hajj and Umrah, dua can be done. There are specific places where the dua is recommended. For example, a person making Umrah while a person is making Tawaf, when the person between Rukn al-Yamani and Hajar al-Aswad, which is the last corner of the Kaaba, رَبَّنَا آتِنَا فِي الدُّنْيَا حَسَنَةً وَفِي الْآخِرَةِ حَسَنَةً وَقِنَا عَذَابَ النَّارِ, specific dua to be said. Making dua or the intentions when a person is drinking Zamzam, between the Safa and Marwa, making dua or reciting Quran. These are all places of making dua, whether it's the praise of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala or asking from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But to make it specific at a certain time, and if she meant that a person would make the Umrah after Isha, is it part of the Sunnah? Of course not. There's no such a thing. People do it out of the convenience that it's not too hot, for example. But there's no specific time where it's recommended to do the Umrah at this time, or a specific time where it's recommended to make dua at this time, unless you are in the last part of the night where the dua everywhere, not just in Umrah or in Mecca, everywhere the dua is is something that is very virtuous at that time. So there's no specifics whatsoever with this.
Jazakallah khairan. We're going to take a short break, inshallah, my dear sisters. And when we come back, I want to ask Sheikh Ibrahim something related to Umrah. Is there a special reward for making Umrah during the month of Ramadan? I'll ask him that after the break, inshallah, so please stay with us.
Dear sisters, let us get closer to Allah. Dear sisters, let us learn of Rasulullah.
Provided that you do not use it to provoke your what you call your system to produce more saliva. It breaks your fast. Excessive bleeding. That makes the person weak during fasting.
Yes.
But the one who vomits deliberately, وَمَنِ اسْتَقَاءَ عَمْدًا فَلْيَقْضِي. The one who vomits deliberately, he should make it up. This is one type of people who fast just because they don't want to be embarrassed. The main criteria is those who fast just for any reason other than Allah.
However, you are still violating the rules of Allah. You are still not doing what He asks of you. How can you then get back so your heart is pure?
Providing food, I noticed that some people are doing it maybe in a way that makes it difficult for their family.
If the old person is generally fit, let's say, and they would like to observe the fasting, however, they would become a little bit faint, could they not, observe the fast a little bit?
You are honored, O man of the Quran. It is Ramadan.
Muslims everywhere are faced with issues and situations every day. Let's find those solutions together, right here on Face Islam. Won't you join us here for Face Islam?
Dear sisters, let us get closer to Allah. Dear sisters, let us learn of Rasulullah.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. My dear sisters, welcome back to our program, Dear Sisters, an hour dedicated especially to answer your questions and to hear your thoughts, inshallah, as we're approaching the month of Ramadan. Also, if you have any relationship questions, inshallah, feel free to give us a call on our phone line at 002-02-38555, 248 or 249, inshallah, or through Skype at Huda_TV, Huda_TV. Sheikh Ibrahim, before the break, I wanted to ask you, is there a special reward for making Umrah during the month of Ramadan?
Yes, and when we say rewards, that means we either have to say something from the Quran or from the authentic Sunnah of the Prophet. We need to train ourselves like this, and it's very important that we get the evidence clear like that. Why there is rewards? Because the Prophet ﷺ said in the authentic hadith, Umratun fi Ramadan ka hajjati ma'i. That Umrah in Ramadan is like a Hajj with me. Like Hajj with the Prophet ﷺ. As if you made Hajj with the Prophet ﷺ. This is, it does not make it that you don't have to make Hajj, since you made Umrah in Ramadan, but it means the rewards. Yes. The rewards of making Umrah in Ramadan is like making Hajj with the Prophet ﷺ. How much reward that is. There's nothing that get closer to someone even seeing the Prophet ﷺ for a minute. And that's why the Sahaba radiallahu anhum, nobody can come into that level. The Prophet ﷺ said in the authentic hadith, إن أشد أمتي حبا لي رجل يتمنى لو يراني بأهله وماله. That among the most of my ummah that loves me, a man that would wish to see me even if he would give all of his wealth and all of his family just to see the Prophet ﷺ. So imagine making Hajj with the Prophet ﷺ, how much the reward is that, and it's the mercy of Allah by making Umrah in Ramadan. So it doesn't have to be the last 10 days of Ramadan, or anytime during the month of Ramadan, Umrah is such a virtuous thing.
Bismillah ta'ala. If you remember a couple of weeks ago, a sister, I think maybe it was we recorded it a couple of weeks ago, but it was aired last week. The sister was asking about the food ingredients. And you answered her by saying that if there's an ingredient that, even though it's in small amounts, if in large amounts it would intoxicate, then it would be haram. She's asking if there are very small amounts of a certain syrup or something like that that would be put in cakes, for example. Would that also make it haram?
Right. These things, again, if the syrup or whatever is being put in any food as a food ingredient, if a barrel of it, for example, a big portion of it, does it have the nature of intoxicating or not? It might kill the people. It might kill the person if he takes a big portion of it. But the issue is, does it has part of its physical characteristics that it would intoxicate or not? If the answer is yes, then it's not permissible. But we have to be careful because some of these ingredients can have some words that might seem alcohol, whatever there is, but it's not alcoholic actually. So we have to check to make sure that that specific ingredient is being checked.
Jazakallah khairan. Sister Zahida from Saudi Arabia, Assalamu alaikum. Yes, sisters. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam.
How old are you? Sister Zahida, I can hear you. Go ahead. Do you have a question or a comment?
Question.
Go ahead.
I am right now 9 years old.
MashaAllah.
I still did not start praying.
I can hear you. Continue.
I still did not start praying. Is it sinful?
Is it sinful that you haven't started praying? Okay, we'll answer you, inshallah. Jazakallah khairan. Barakallah fiki. And Allah bless your parents, inshallah.
It's a very tricky question.
Yes. She's 9 years old and she's asking about salah.
It's
some of the hardest questions come from some of the youngest people, right?
The age of puberty, of course, is the age what makes the person responsible for their actions, whether it's sinful or not sinful. And that can be from 9 or 10 or 11 years old, depends on the person. But even if it's before the age of puberty, the child might not be sinful, but the parents are being sinful if they do not make their child make their salah. And you don't want to have your parents committing sins by not making the salah. Because the child, once he's 7 years old or she's 7 years old, there's no choice. They have to pray. Prayer is just such a beautiful thing. We cannot live our life without making our prayers. So 9 years old, the Prophet ﷺ said if they're 10 years old, they are to be punished. Physically to be punished because there's no excuse for them. Even if they are before the age of puberty. So it's the responsibility of the parents to make sure that the child, 9 years old, never to miss prayer whatsoever, even Fajr prayer. Once you get used to it, it becomes the joy of your life. So never miss it, inshallah ta'ala.
Ibn ta'ala. Barakallah feek. Sister Fardoos, assalamu alaikum.
Hello, assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam. Where are you calling us from, sister?
My name is Fardoos. I'm calling from London.
MashaAllah. Go ahead, sister.
I just wanted to ask a question regarding my cousin. Obviously, I know as a sister, you know, my cousin isn't my mahram. But for me specifically, I was raised up with my cousin. We grew up together for a long time. So he's kind of like a brother to me. And obviously, as I've grown up and I've sought more knowledge, I know that it's not really permissible for me to sort of hang around with him. So I just want to know if I'm in a situation where, you know, me and my cousin, because we're so close, we don't really have that kind of desire for each other. We're like brother and sister, really. Is it permissible for us to go out together just like a brother and sister or something like that? For example, we wanted to go and play tennis together, me, my cousin, and my other elder sister, but the question of the whole, you know, cousin issue came up. So I was just wondering, is it permissible under my circumstances with him being so close to us? So that's my question, inshallah.
Jazakallah khairan. Barakallah feek. Very clear question, mashallah.
Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the most wise. And that's why these orders from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we have to witness the wisdom of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Cousins in Islam, they, as the sister said, that he is not a mahram to you. That means it's permissible for you to get married. And maybe that specific relationship, for example, since you grew up together and things like this, But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best, and things can change, you never know. And whether it changes or doesn't change, whether this case or the other, the rulings comes for everyone. Right? A person might say a valid argument. I can look at women, for example, and I don't get affected. Is it permissible for me then not to lower my gaze? The answer is still mandatory for you to lower your gaze, because it doesn't matter whether you're affected or not, because this is an order from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And everybody would say, I don't get affected, and things like this. People will continue to do that. So that's why the ruling from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala should be a general one, and everybody should abide with it and seek help from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And if you leave something for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would replace it for you by something that is better. So definitely, yes, you should observe this ruling that you should be separated from one another. You should not do what you said that you were about to do, or go out together and things like this. He's a total stranger to you, although he is your relative. He has some rights and things like that, but not with intermingling, and not to be alone, and to observe these rulings for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Jazakallah khairan. We have Sister Fatima from Gambia. Assalamu alaikum. Sister Fatima was trying to call us from earlier and the phone cut off. Inshallah, hopefully this time is good. Assalamu alaikum, Sister Fatima.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
How are you, brother?
I can hear you very well, sister. Go ahead with your question or comment.
Yeah, my question is regarding there is during menstruation. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Go ahead.
Good. What are the type of zikr we can do?
Is there? You said during during the menses?
Yeah. During.
Yeah. What's the question? During the menses, what?
Zikr. What are the type of?
What type of what?
Because some of what I mean. What are the type of questions?
Okay.
I don't know if we can read the Quran. We can actually do Quran.
Okay. Quran, right? Okay.
Yeah, we can use the Quran. What are the type of things we can?
Excellent. Thank you so much. I got the question. What type of things can she do during the period of the month where she's not able to pray?
When a woman is in her menses, the Prophet ﷺ said that this is something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ordained unto the daughters of Adam. So this is the qadr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Certain things are forbidden for the women to do, like the salah, for example, like fasting. And this is forbidden for them to do that. The fasting, that they would make it up, but not the salah. They can recite Quran. They cannot touch the Quran, but they can recite it. They can open it and read it. There's no problem whatsoever, as the ulama they say. She can open a book of tafsir that has Quran, so that if she touches it, it's okay. She can read the books of knowledge. She can make dhikr, she can make dua. So even in Ramadan, if a woman is not fasting because she has her menses, she would make dua. During the night, she would make dhikr, recite Quran, make dua, but not the salah. Giving charity, of course, giving charity is not a ritual act of worship. It's just the rituality of some of the things. Only performing the salah and fasting and holding and carrying the Quran and making tawaf. This is not permissible also, to make tawaf around the Kaaba. Other than that, mashallah, it's easy when it comes to acts of worship. No.
Well, here's a question that some people may ask, and it goes back to the idea when we said some people fast, and even though they don't pray. They say, well, a woman in her menses is not required to make up the prayers that she missed, but she is required to make up the fasting. Therefore, in their opinion, fasting is more important than prayer. What do you say to that?
No, this is actually an analogy that is wrong. Because definitely there are pillars of Islam, but salah is the most important act of worship, and there's no such a thing less important. But the reason why the women would make up the fast and not make up the salah is what Aisha radiallahu anha, when someone asked her that question, she said, we used to be ordered to make up fasting but not to make up salah, and that was enough for them. Because this is something, when acts of worship, there is not too much in need for us to know why four rak'ah for dhuhr, why not 3, why not 2. Of course, there's a great wisdom behind it, but this is the order of Allah. Plus, when you see the wisdom, yes, there's a great wisdom. Salah, it's out of the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If she's in 7-8 days in the menses, times 5, that's too many amount of work that she has to make up all after she's finished with her menses. But Ramadan comes once a year, 1 month, and if she break her fast 6 or 7 days, she can make up that day, is no problem. But the salah becomes too much every month. She has to do that, in which Ramadan it's only one time. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the most merciful. Matters of the religion is easy. But to use this as an analogy for something else, it's not right, and it doesn't make sense.
We have about 2.5 minutes left for the program. This is the last live program that I'm in, that you're in before the month of Ramadan. I want you to share a few words of advice in about 2 minutes, inshallah.
Wallahi, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us among those who witness the month of Ramadan. We need to, all of us, by the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, have some truthful moments and turn to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone, that since we're not witnessing the month of Ramadan yet, that we put our trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would make it easy, that this has become a life changing for us. It's not like every other Ramadan comes, fasting and this and that, and then goes away and we go back to our own habits. This needs to be a life changing for us, that we will start to really enjoy the deen of Islam, to be steadfast on the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And again, look at it, this is your nafs, your own being, that you need to overcome all of these attachments and laziness and so on that we have in ourselves, that make us more inclined to follow our desires and commit sins. We will, by the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, will overcome all of this by the help of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to change our whole entire life, to live our life according to the way of the Prophet ﷺ, because we will abstain from what is necessity of our life. That means we should not come afterwards and say, I cannot help it but commit evil acts. There's no excuse then. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us witness Laylatul Qadr, and to make us witness the month of Ramadan, and to make it easy for all the Muslims all over the world.
To make it, as you said, the most beautiful Ramadan ever. Ramadan where we actually enjoy being close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, enjoy the worships. Let me end by asking you a question that I asked to my guests on the Straight Path on Saturday. Do you think as Muslims we're a little bit weird because we celebrate, we know we have people putting decorations in their houses and getting happy and hyped up for Ramadan. Most other religions, they celebrate when they're done with the act of worship. We're celebrating more work, we're celebrating more effort. Are we weird?
To the disbelievers, yeah. But this is wonderful. That's why our celebrations is in matters of obedience to Allah. And that's how Muslims are, and they should be. They celebrate what get them closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This dunya will finish. And what get them closer to Allah is what would make them have the everlasting joy. So why shouldn't they enjoy now that Allah gave them the ability? Many people under the ground are dead. They wish they can come back to this life to just fast one day.
One day, yes.
But it's finished for them. And we will go to their stage too. So we need to take advantage of being here by doing the best we can to do the things that would benefit us in the hereafter.
Inshallah ta'ala. I just want to tell you at the end that I really, really enjoyed this program. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Not only this episode, but all the previous episodes of Dear Sisters since we've started, Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. And if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us life after Ramadan, maybe inshallah we can continue together. I really enjoyed the discussions with you.
It's my pleasure. Me too.
Jazakallah khair. And my dear sisters in Islam, thank you so much for being with us this afternoon and all the previous afternoons on Dear Sisters. The program is not going to be airing during the month of Ramadan because I'll be busy on another program, One Step Closer, and Sheikh Ibrahim will be busy every night, inshallah, on blessed nights as he joins Dr. Muhammad Salah and other guests explaining the ayat of the Taraweeh prayer that the Imam reads during that night. So inshallah, hopefully both programs will be of benefit. We pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if He gives us life, to continue this program if it's of benefit to you after Ramadan, bi'idhnillah ta'ala. Jazakumullahu khairan. We'll see you later. Have a blessed Ramadan. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make this the best Ramadan ever, inshallah. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Dear sisters, let us get closer to Allah. Dear sisters, let us learn of Rasulullah. Dear sisters, let's make the future bright. Dear sisters, mothers, daughters, and wives. Dear sisters, let us get closer to Allah. Dear sisters, let us learn of Rasulullah. Dear sisters, let's make the future bright. Dear sisters, mothers, daughters, and wives. Dear sisters, let us get closer to Allah. Dear sisters, let us learn of Rasulullah. Dear sisters, let's make the future bright. Dear sisters, mothers, daughters,